Tansei, good afternoon. I'm Chris Nachkate. Welcome to APTN National News. A BC Conservative candidate who made derogatory comments about Indigenous people on election night is now facing calls to be removed from the party. Here's what happened last Thursday and the fallout over the weekend. First reported by the Vancouver Sun on the night of October 19th, Vancouver Island University student Aliona Latsanik was interviewing Conservative MLA candidate Marina Samhoshnikoff. When the student mentioned she was taking an Indigenous Studies class, Samhoshnikoff replied by saying, quote, "It's all a lie. They're rewriting Indigenous history. Like Indigenous people, they were hunters and gatherers. They make them some enlightened people. They didn't have writing. They didn't have an alphabet. They tell you that they have some foods made of wheat, whatever they call it. They didn't have wheat. They didn't grow anything. They were very simple people. They fought each other." When the student told her she had a very Western-centric point of view, she replied, "They didn't have any sophisticated laws. They were savages. They fought each other all the time." Samhoshnikoff went on to say, "Europeans brought science here. Now they teach you that some kind of Indigenous knowledge. What is Indigenous knowledge?" Samhoshnikoff also denounced the BC NDP government's adoption of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, claiming it has turned non-Indigenous people in the province into second-rate citizens. Grand Chief Stuart Phillip of the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs called her remarks sickening. He is calling for Samhoshnikoff's removal from the Conservative Party. BC Conservative Party leader John Rustad condemned Samhoshnikoff's comments, saying they are inaccurate and inconsistent with the party's values. Rustad did not say if she would be removed from the party. Samhoshnikoff, who is a medical doctor, is behind her NDP opponent by 113 votes following a recount on Saturday. So far, she has not made any public comment about her remarks. Two First Nations men who each spent 50 years in prison for a murder they did not commit recently told their stories to a Senate committee last week. Clarence Woodhouse and Brian Anderson hope proposed legislation will create a new miscarriage of justice commission that should prevent others from suffering fates similar to their own. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
On Thursday, Clarence Woodhouse ran up against some of the same systemic flaws that led to his wrongful conviction back in 1974. The Senate Committee on Legal and Constitutional Affairs lacked a Soto translator, so the Penamutang First Nation man could tell his story in his first language. Instead, his co-accused, Brian Anderson, also of the same First Nation, had to speak largely for both.
The police took advantage of our young age and unknowing of the criminal justice system, and the fact we were Anishinaabe and did not speak English well. Being questioned by the police, they threatened me and used violence. It was easier for the police to make up confessions. These false confessions are the reason we were convicted.
Anderson was exonerated in 2023 and Woodhouse earlier this month of their convictions for murder of a Winnipeg restaurant chef in 1973. Bill C-40 aims to create a miscarriage of justice commission, which would speed up the process and make it easier for defendants to apply for a wrongful conviction. The bill has passed through the House of Commons and currently sits at second reading in the Senate. Former Justice Minister David Lametti is a big supporter of the legislation.
The current process that we have functions, but it functions too slowly. It is too costly, especially to individuals who have to try to move the system along.
For his part, Anderson told the committee it is sadly too late for him to make up for the decades that have been lost.
It took 50 years, almost to the day, to finally prove my innocence. That is an entire lifetime. That is time that I cannot get back.
The committee allowed Woodhouse to address it in both Soto and English as best he could. He had a simple statement to make.
I was in prison for nothing.
According to Innocence Canada, Woodhouse was a last-minute addition to the Senate committee, and the committee did not have time to have a translator on hand. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
11 remote First Nations in northern Manitoba are sounding the alarm together. They want to know how many more lives it's going to take before the federal government will hold up their end of Jordan's principle. With more, here's T.R. Wheatley.
To come and see what we are dealing with.
A personal invite to the Prime Minister from Keewatin Tribal Council, or KTC's Grand Chief Walter Westesekut. Sitting at a table in a Winnipeg hotel, these leaders say children's lives are at risk while the federal government continues the red tape.
We had a councillor from Tataskra Cree Nation come to our AGA a couple of days ago and announce that a child had died while waiting for supports.
Last month, the First Nations Caring Society were back at the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal for non-compliance by the feds to uphold Jordan's principle. That process revealed up to 82,000 cases are pending intake. This week, the Caring Society backing KTC, saying Manitoba has some of the highest backlog numbers. Betsy Kennedy is the acting Grand Chief for the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. She says all 63 First Nations she represents are in dire need.
I know this because we all have a child that has these special needs.
Chief Richard Hart of Bonabonabee Cree Nation says the remoteness of the KTC nations amplifies the crisis.
We have to plan for winter roads, for supplies, equipment, that type of thing.
And with no hospitals or essential health services, he says families often have to be sent to live in urban settings.
You have to, open up offices, you have to get equipment, all that type of stuff, right? And you can get started on that process, and you have a lot of clients. You can't really go anywhere because the funding is being held back.
In the meantime, KTC says they have bridge financed over $8 million, taking away from other critical services.
Our people are dying as we fight against an opioid crisis.
Making yet another plea to cut the red tape so they can provide basic human rights to their citizens. T.R. Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
October is Women's History Month in Canada, and APTN caught up with a family-run business in Alberta, one that can bring you back to nature. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
Surrounded by 80 acres of forest, the Woods Experience and Native Wild Trading Post are two family-owned businesses that offer a unique way to connect to nature. And it's only a 90-minute drive northwest of Edmonton. Wendy Pozluzny runs the two attractions with her husband, son, and daughter-in-law. The Métis entrepreneur started Native Wild in 2010. Native Wild Trading Post offers locally sourced and constructed clothing for purchase. And, as their name says, for trade. A petting zoo adds to the ambiance.
Our trap line is on the back of our land, and so we harvest all our animals from the land, from bear to coyote to lynx to marten, fishers. I mean, the list goes on. So we harvest them sustainably and humanely and bring them into the workshop. We skin them and we do all the processing ourselves.
Wendy does a lot of the assembly herself in the workshop.
I make all the products by hand. I do have some commercial machines behind me to help me along, but I do all the trapper hats, fur gauntlet gloves, shawl making. I teach workshops in just about everything that I make as well.
Like medicine bag workshops, snaring, outdoor survival, and more. They offer multi-day workshops in line trapping and hunting. In 2021, the family added the Woods Experience. People can sleep in a cabin or teepee and connect to nature in their outdoor spa that includes a hot tub and sauna.
We're just, disconnecting from the digital world and connecting with the land and relaxing. It's a healing process when you're here. Like, it's just so beautifully, authentically natural.
And business is good. They are adding a second spa, a sweat lodge, and more overnight accommodations, which they hope to have open in 2025.
People are just blown away when they come here because we have the animals as well, but they can take a workshop, they can be in the spa, they learn a lot about the land and how we do our things.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, at the Woods Experience, Alberta.
We're always looking for your feedback or story ideas. Here's how you can continue the conversation. If you have a story you want to share, send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, go to aptnnews.ca. You can find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation. and see our latest stories. A local Indigenous restaurant in Vancouver brought more awareness to Vancouver Indigenous Fashion Week. That story when we're back in about 3 minutes. Stick around. Welcome back. Environment Canada says human-caused climate change is one of the main reasons behind more intense heat waves across the country. It says it analyzed 37 of the hottest heat waves in the country this summer and found out that most occurred due to climate change. Environment Canada also says the country is warming up at double the global average rate, warning that the cost of more extreme weather could range from lost productivity to even loss of life. The Royal Canadian Legion has launched its annual Poppy campaign to support veterans.
Every community and portions of the city will be hitting the pavement, delivering poppy boxes.
The campaign runs until Remembrance Day and covers the Legion's veteran assistance programming, which includes housing assistance, mental and physical health supports, funding for research into post-traumatic stress disorder, and helping veterans access their benefits. A fundraiser was held at Vancouver's only Indigenous restaurant to support the upcoming Vancouver Indigenous Fashion Week. APTN's Tina House was there and has the story.
Thank you. Welcome. It's a busy night here at Salmon and Bannock as guests dine on a selection of roast bison, mixed vegetables, coho salmon, oolakins, and elk skewers. All the proceeds will benefit Vancouver Indigenous Fashion Week.
I always tell my staff, my team, I say, you know, let's get the place ready as if we're having a dinner party at home. And so that always feels amazing.
And tonight, it's all about good food and high-end fashion, as designer Yolanda Skelton presents some of her collection.
This is my Thunderbird dress. So this is to show you what can be done. That was a coat that had long sleeves, and it was a coat, and I turned it into what I've created here with the different pieces.
Yolanda is from the Gitxsan Nation and gave up her career as a teacher to follow her dreams of designing clothes, and her creations have been featured on runways around the world. She says everything she creates is one of a kind. She says fashion is her way of empowering those that get to wear her clothing.
The inspiration, it's always comes from different people like you. So you would come to me and you would tell me about who you are, where you come from, and then I would create a piece based on the story that you tell me. And then you take that piece and then you go out and you be an orator for your piece. It's your story, it's your people.
Skelton will open up the 5th annual Vancouver Indigenous Fashion Week with Red Dress Night, along with many other designers being featured this year, like Hemikelis, Pam Baker, and Kayla Looking Horse.
To see how it's grown from outside to the QE lobby to inside the theater, and then we just talked to the convention center this year and how they want in the convention center. It just shows that Vancouver Indigenous Fashion Week art, culture is alive and well. I think Canadians are curious. I think that people are really interested in our stories.
I just get so inspired, and I love seeing all of the community coming together, all the community celebrating, all the beauty. Who doesn't love fashion? I mean, and then seeing Indigenous fashion is just next level amazing.
Vancouver Indigenous Fashion Week kicks off November the 20th to 23rd at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Beautiful work. And here are our results of our weekly web poll question from last week. We asked, do you understand why chiefs at the Assembly of First Nations voted to renegotiate an agreement on reforming the on-reserve child welfare system? 40% saying yes, and with the rest splitting between no and need more information. Next, we asked, do you feel your First Nation is ready to take control of child welfare? Not many felt your First Nation was ready to take over, with 25% saying yes and 50% saying no, and the rest unsure at 24%. And lastly, we asked, would you feel comfortable with a nuclear waste disposal site near your drinking water if they said all safety regulations were met? An overwhelming response saying no, they would not feel comfortable at 81%, 15% saying yes, and 4% were unsure. Thank you all for voting. Manitoba's very own Chanel Monroe, a Métis magician from Winnipeg, is back in our studio to talk more about her recent success. That interview when we're back in less than 3 minutes. Stay with us. Starting on the East Coast, St. John 7, Charlottetown 3. Happy Valley, Goose Bay 2, Cartwright 2 as well. Saguenay 3, Val-d'Or -1. Windsor 4, Sarnia 11. 0 in Kapuskasking, Wawa 3. God's Lake 3, Puckatawagan 4. Winnipeg 7, Princess Harbor 6. 4 in Regina, Saskatoon +1. -1 in Stony Rapids, Meadow Lake +2. 2 in Fort McMurray, Fort Chipewyan 1. 13 in Medicine Hat, Calgary 10. Tofino 12, Vancouver 11. 7 in Smithers, Fort Nelson -4. -12 in Mayo, -6 in Whitehorse. -6 in Yellowknife, -3 in Wati. -19 in Tuktoyak, Paulatuk -11. Chesterfield 2, Baker Lake -3. And -5 in Clyde River, Aglulik -1. Chanel Monroe, the world's first Métis woman magician from the Treaty 1 territory in Manitoba, is being recognized by a number of magazines this fall, including Say magazine and Vanish, the international magic magazine. Monroe is the first Métis woman magician to be featured on the front page of Vanish, an opportunity she could only dream of doing until now. For a number of years, Monroe has traveled across the country doing magic shows for thousands of audiences, including in First Nation communities, alongside her husband and co-magician, Sean Watson. Here's our recent interview we did with Chanel Monroe. Chanel, I want to thank you for being back here in our APTN National News Winnipeg studio. My first question I want to ask, of course, is you were recently featured on Say magazine and Vanish magazine, the international, magician magazine, something you could only dream of doing. Talk to me about what it feels like to be featured on those two magazines.
Sure, thanks for having me back on APTN, Creason. It's great to be here. So yeah, my Vanish magazine cover was a dream come true. It's the largest magic magazine publication for magicians across the world. And I've only been a magician for 4 years, and Vanish magazine has actually featured Chris Angel on the cover. So to also be on the cover is an absolute honor. It's a funny story. So my partner, Sean Watson, magician, he said to me, I actually know the owner of Vanish magazine. I can get you on the cover if you want. And I said, no, if I get on the cover, it's because of my own volition and what I do. And sure enough, a few months later, the owner of Vanish magazine called me and said, you've been making waves, doing magic in Indigenous communities. It's something that's never been done before to this extent, and I want to feature you on the cover because you're doing something really different and really great. So it was awesome to just make it there on my own, and because I am doing something different. And then once I got on the cover of Vanish, it sort of snowballed to be featured on the cover of Say magazine.
Cool.
And so Say magazine was created by a Métis woman who wanted to amplify Indigenous voices in the education sector.
Yeah.
So Say, it stands for Spirit of Aboriginal Youth. Mm-hmm. And so to be on the cover of their magazine and continue on that legacy is a real honor.
This past summer and throughout the months, you've been traveling up north, doing shows in Indigenous communities. Why is that work so important for you?
Well, I've always leaned into my Indigenous culture. I've always been very proud of my Red River Métis ancestry. I'm a firm believer that without Indigenous culture in Canada, there would be zero culture in Canada, or it would be a bleak landscape. So I just love my own Indigenous culture, and it's something I lean into in my lifestyle and in my artwork. But I find there's a real importance to be performing up north and in remote communities, because a lot of times these communities don't have access to entertainment. And I feel like entertainers are a great role model and source of inspiration for the youth. Whether you're a magician, musician, singer, actor, it's just an incredible way to give back. And it's also the most fulfilling for me. Sean and I just got back from a 2-week tour in Yukon, and it was the first time these kids have ever seen a magic show. And so the looks on their faces when they see us do a trick, that's just so fulfilling for me.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, this past summer in Manitoba, you went out to a northern Indigenous community there and brought along Johnny Reid and Mariana's Trench, you know, both gifted artists and band there. Can you explain how that event went?
Yes, so I did that with my agency that I have with my partner, Sean Watson. So it's called Thrill Star Entertainment. And so we are looking at bringing A-list, big name people to remote fly-in communities. And St. Teresa Point seemed like they just absolutely loved it. I've been looking at their community Facebook photos and the photos that they've taken with Johnny Reid and Mariana's Trench. Mariana's Trench did this incredible thing where they brought one of their drums, like a drum kit drum, and like all of the members signed it and they gifted it to the chief, and there's beautiful photos of that. So it was a really beautiful event to help orchestrate with the help of St. Teresa Point.
That's so great to hear. Chanel, finally, what's next for you in your career?
So next is actually another agency called Thunderbird Talent. So I'm only going to feature Inuit, Indigenous, Métis, First Nations performers and artists. And it's also going to be a consulting agency. So anyone who's like me, who's an artist that wants to understand more about the show business aspect and learn more about the business, it's also going to be consulting like that, and geared towards young Aboriginal youth that are up and coming artists.
Well, Chanel, we'll have to leave it there. We really thank you for your time, and we wish you all the best on your journey ahead.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Miigwech.
And be sure to tune in same time tomorrow when Chanel Monroe will be back here to give us some Halloween magic. You don't want to miss that. That's your midday newscast for this Monday, October 28th. We'll be back again in a few hours for your evening newscasts. From everyone at APTN National News, hi, miigwech, masicho. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next day.